My name is Mark, a recording angel. I've been observing this earth since the dawn of creation. The Most High has asked me to share my recordings with you. The following are my records of Earth's earliest patriarchs and prophets, collected in this book, Survivors of the Dark Rebellion, God's Heroes from Adam to David. If today's recording contains situations which might be uncomfortable for younger listeners, I will mark the video with the words Parental Guidance Recommended.
Chapter 6, Part 2, Asenath. It had been many months since the disappearance of Joseph. Asenath no longer looked forward to her trips to Avarice with her father, but she continued to accompany him, although her father made arrangements for her to stay in Pharaoh's household when they were in town. She made friends with the other women at court, and realized that she was being groomed for a political marriage. Asenath sighed as the slave girl put her wig into place and began to paint her eyelids. "Do you ever wish you were a princess?" she asked the slave. "Not when I'm working, my lady," the slave replied respectfully. "I try very hard just to keep my mind on my work and not wish anything, but in the night sometimes I have dreams that I am pretty and important, and people are serving me instead of me serving them. Sometimes I have dreams of being an unimportant child of a peasant. Then I would have so much more freedom. I could do what I wanted to, go where I wanted to, fall in love with whom I wanted to." The slave girl was quiet. "I suppose," she said, "though I haven't found life to be that way. Now I don't suppose that you have. I guess I never wished I was a slave, just—" She sighed again and left her thoughts unspoken. The slave girl smiled. "My brother is a slave too," she said. "Really?" the girl said, only half interested. "Yes, he works over at the prison." Asenath's ears perked up. "He does? What does he do there?" "He's in charge of bringing food and supplies to the governor of the jail and delivering messages for him." "What does he tell you about life at the jail?" "Well," the slave girl continued, smiling slightly, "he says that a slave of Potiphar who was sent there is quite gifted in administration." "Really?" "Apparently he was while he was working for Potiphar, too, for he had been put in charge of the entire household." "Yes," Asenath said, "we used to go there for feasts, and I met him several times, if he's the same one." The slave girl nodded. "Well, he has done the same thing in the jail. He's continued to be promoted until he runs the place. From what my brother tells me, he seems to be a good person. Not only is the governor of the jail pleased with him, but the prisoners seem happier too. Apparently others who have worked under the governor have played favorites and embezzled food that was to go to the prisoners and mistreated those that they didn't care for. Joseph seems to be very fair-minded and treats the prisoners much better than they ever have been, which is a good thing because my brother says that with most of them being political prisoners, they will not be there long. If they have been treated well, they may not harbor such ill feelings toward Pharaoh or the governor of the prison when they're released." Asenath nodded. So Joseph was still alive and doing well. He was still the same person that she had come to know, consistent, fair, and always an astute leader. "He sounds like a good man." She kept her eyes on the mirror she held before her, watching the slave apply her makeup, but inside she was bursting with joy. What if Joseph's God really did exist? What if he really was higher than her own gods? Joseph always believed his God knew where he was and had him there for a purpose. Could he have a purpose even in Pharaoh's jail? The girl didn't know, but hope sprung anew in her heart. Later, when she was alone, she closed her eyes and whispered, "God of Joseph, if you are there, and Joseph believes that you are, and I'm beginning to believe that you are, please protect him and care for him and bring him back to me somehow. I don't know how this could be, but Joseph says you can do anything, and I believe him." She stared at the night sky. Would Joseph's God hear her? While she didn't know, she did lay down on her sleeping mat with a new peace in her heart. "Asenath," her father said, "the next 2 days are going to be dangerous. I want you to stay in your quarters here in the palace. Do not go out. Do not go visit anyone. Stay right here." "Why? What's happening?" "A conspiracy is brewing. Potiphar, the captain of the guard, and I have known about it for a short time. There will be arrests made, and there may be some bloodshed and violence." "Even here? In the palace?" she asked incredulously. "Even here in the palace," he replied sadly. "Trust no one and speak of this to no one. Just keep to yourself, stay in your chambers, and do not come out until I send for you."
"I will. I will not mention this to anyone."
Being the daughter of an important official, she was used to keeping secrets.
"I wonder what's happening,"
she thought after returning to her chamber.
"What kind of conspiracy? Against whom? Against father? Against Pharaoh? Against Egypt?"
The day continued quietly until that evening. Then she suddenly heard muffled shouts and the sounds of running feet down the hall. Asenath stayed in her chamber as instructed, and Senetenpu dropped the large beam across the door into its slot so no one could enter. They sat there quietly, straining to hear what was happening in the palace. More shouts came from many directions. Apparently, Potiphar had planned the ambush well, catching the conspirators off guard. The shouting and scuffling quickly ended, and soon Asenath heard a tap at the door. When her father called her name, she and her servant pushed the beam up and flung the door open.
"Father, I'm so glad you're safe. I heard commotion in the hall. I was worried about you."
He hugged her. "I was worried about you, too. That's why I wanted you to stay in your room. It is safe to come out now."
"What happened?"
"A conspiracy against Pharaoh sought to assassinate him and take over the government. However, we surprised them."
"Where are they? What did you do with them?"
"Well, the ringleader is dead, and so are many of those who tried to defend him. Others have been put in the prison until we can determine whether they were involved or not. Many arrests have been made, and it will probably take us weeks to work through everything and separate the innocent from the guilty. But the captain of the guard does his job well, and his information sources are apparently reliable and accurate."
"What a relief for us,"
Asenath said, smiling at her father. "I will be very busy for the next few weeks with the trials in Pharaoh's court, so we'll be here a while. I wanted you and Senetenpu to know it was safe to come out now, and that you may do whatever it is you women do during the daytime."
Asenath laughed. "You know it's nothing interesting, Father. That's why I like following you around."
He nodded. "I understand. It doesn't sound interesting to me either. But if you're going to make a good marriage, you need to know a few womanly things, and I'm afraid those are things I can't teach you." Bidding her good night, he headed down the hall. Asenath leaned against the wall, staring up at the night sky, through the little window just below the ceiling.
"God of Joseph,"
she whispered,
"thank you for protecting us, and thank you for protecting my father. After all, it couldn't have been Ra. He's gone to bed."
She giggled at her little joke. Then she and Senetenpu went to bed too. The next morning, Asenath watched for Merit, the young slave girl whose brother worked in the prison. By afternoon, she had found her and asked if she could borrow her to help her with her preparations for the evening social activities. As the young slave girl painted the dark kohl along her eyelids, Asenath asked nonchalantly,
"Is your brother a lot busier now with the prison so full?"
"Oh, yes," Merit laughed. "He says he's been running errands so fast he meets himself coming and going."
"I'm sure he's very busy. However, it must be quite interesting." "Do you know the chief butler's in there? And so is the baker. It seems all kinds of people were in on the conspiracy." "They haven't decided yet, have they, who were conspirators and who might have been innocent?" "Not yet, but everyone suspected has been put in jail. They're probably all guilty." "Really? It'd be pretty scary to imagine that the person in charge of all the royal food and drink was involved. What if they poisoned everyone at court?"
Asenath shuddered. It was not something she wanted to think about. She wondered if Joseph were talking to those men now, and whether he could tell who was innocent and guilty. And then she remembered the dreams he had told her he had had when he was still at home, and how he believed the one God might speak to him through dreams. They were odd dreams for a young son to have, even odder for a slave. Who knew what the one God planned for Joseph? Maybe the one God would let Joseph know who was innocent and who was guilty. Asenath did not care what they did with the guilty conspirators, but the idea of someone innocent being punished greatly disturbed her.
"God of Joseph,"
she whispered at her window,
"I hope you don't mind me talking to you all the time. I just miss Joseph so much, and it's comforting to me to know that he and I both talk to you. Joseph says that you know what's inside of everyone's heart. You know who's innocent and guilty. Please do something to protect the innocent. And that includes Joseph. I know you have a plan for him. Please help the others. I will always worship you if you can help me with this, even if I never see Joseph again."
"Asenath," her father said, "tomorrow will be your birthday. I'm sorry I've been so involved in the courts of Pharaoh here for so long, but with the conspiracy hearings it will be longer before we will be able to go back to On, where we can celebrate as we used to. In the meantime, is there anything I can buy you that will amuse you?" His daughter paused for a moment.
"Do you think you could buy the young slave Merit from Pharaoh?" she asked. "I like her. She amuses me."
Certainly. I'll ask him today, and thanks for being so understanding. We'll do something fun when we go home to celebrate the times we're missing now. Meanwhile, I'm glad you found someone to amuse you here at court. Asenath smiled to herself. Merritt would be her link to the prison. If she were her slave, she would get to hear news from there all the time. It made her feel a little closer to Joseph. At least she would know what he was doing, and if all was well with him. Father was as good as his word and approached Pharaoh about the young slave, but when the ruler realized it was Asenath's birthday, he refused to sell Merritt to his priest. He gave her as a gift instead. Clapping her hands in delight, Asenath cried,
"Oh, thank you, your majesty."
Merritt seemed pleased too, although she kept her gaze centered on the floor. Later that night, as Senatenpu was putting her to bed, Asenath asked her,
"Do you think Merritt was happy to be given to me? It must not feel good to be given to someone if you had no choice in the matter." "Well, she has no choice in the matter,"
Senatenpu, always a very practical woman, pointed out.
"Do you think she'll be happy with us?"
The woman stared at her for a long moment.
"You know nothing about the lives of slaves. Happiness isn't really a word that most slaves know the meaning of. Merritt has not been particularly well treated, being one of the younger and less important slaves here at court. She's homesick for her family. Her life will be much better with you, and maybe someday she might even be happy. But that really isn't a word in the vocabulary of a slave, you know."
Asenath stared at the wall for hours after Senatenpu left. It was true. She didn't know what being a slave was like. She had always been wealthy, well-treated, and well-fed. Many times she had noticed lash marks on the backs of slaves, and she had seen some women slap their slaves for even small infractions. She had just never thought about the issue before. What would it be like to be a slave? Although she tried, she just couldn't imagine. But Joseph knew. As always, her mind turned to him, and she wondered what he was doing and hoped he was sleeping by now this late at night. The next morning, young Merritt was already there with warm water for her bath and makeup for her face when Asenath woke up. She chattered away happily as she assisted her new mistress with her morning routine.
"I'm kind of glad my father was so busy with the hearings, even if I didn't get to go home for my birthday," Asenath told her. "Otherwise they never would have given you to me."
Merritt looked self-conscious.
"It is an honor to serve you, Lady Asenath. Does this mean I will go with you when you return to On?" "Of course."
Then Asenath saw a look of pain flash across the girl's face.
"Why? What's the matter? On is a wonderful place. You'll love it. It's my home. It's where I grew up. And it's much more comfortable there than here."
Then she stopped. It was her home, but it wasn't Merritt's.
"Oh, your brother is here."
Merritt nodded, her eyes welling with tears.
"Well, as your mistress, I will make sure you have duties that will take you by the prison."
The slave girl's eyes lit up.
"You would do that?" "Of course, and I'll go with you. I'll get my father to arrange a bodyguard for us." "Oh, thank you, my lady."
A tear spilled down her cheek, and she brushed it away quickly.
"You are very generous to me. Perhaps if I'm needing another present, just perhaps, Father might buy your brother for me." "Really?" "Yes, but for now, let's figure out a way for you to see him at least once in a while. Though we go back to On, we are frequent visitors in Avarice and of the court." "Yes, you are, my lady. Will I be allowed to accompany you when you come to court?" "Of course. Who else would do my makeup?"
It was only days before Asenath had arranged a trip to the market located near the prison entrance. With an approved bodyguard, Merritt and her brother chatted happily as Asenath browsed in the market, thumping melons, examining cucumbers, and looking at all the imported fabrics and jewelry, spices, and art objects brought in by the traders on the Nile trading vessels. However, she kept her eyes averted from the far wall, the site of the slave market. The slave market wasn't as exciting as it used to be since she had become a friend with Merritt and Joseph. She wondered how many other slaves being sold there had families and friends that they missed. Perhaps all of them. The thought made her shudder. After returning to their quarters in the palace, Merritt was bursting with news.
"Lady Asenath, Ani, my brother, told me all kinds of things from the prison. It's really exciting there with all the trials going on and the investigations. The butler and the baker are in there, plus a bunch of people who aren't as important and whom I've never heard of." "What has been happening?" "Well, the butler and the baker both had dreams that they thought were very significant, but they couldn't figure out their meanings, so they told them to Joseph, the supervisor of the jail."
Ah, Asenath said, smiling to herself. Yes, I've heard of him. They both grinned at each other, though neither one understood totally why the other one was smiling. The butler told Joseph that he had dreamed that he was squeezing grapes into Pharaoh's cup again, and Pharaoh drank from the cup. Joseph told him that the branches on the vine he dreamed about meant that in 3 days something would happen. Pharaoh would call him back into court, and he would be found innocent and get to return to his job. This made the baker really excited, so he told Joseph that he also had a dream. In it, he had 3 baskets on top of his head filled with pastries that Pharaoh loved. Some birds flew down and snatched some food out of his top basket. He was hoping for an exciting interpretation like the butler had, but Joseph told him it meant that in 3 days Pharaoh would bring him back to court, find him guilty, and have him beheaded. Beheaded? Asenath exclaimed. So everyone in the prison is excited and can't wait to find out whether Joseph's interpretations come true or not. Asenath smiled. So he's not just a dreamer, but an interpreter of dreams. What? He dreams them too? Merritt asked. Is that what you meant? Oh, never mind, Asenath said, realizing that she had already said too much. It was a long 3 days. On the morning of the 3rd day, Asenath asked, Father, may Merritt and I come to the Hall of Justice with you? Of course, since it's a public hearing, but are you sure you wouldn't find it too upsetting? I'm just curious to see what happens. She explained to her father the dreams about the butler and the baker. Interesting, the priest murmured. The butler is scheduled for his hearing today, but we don't plan to do the baker's case until tomorrow. May I come? Yes, if you get bored, though, then just let me know and I'll have some servants bring you back here. Merritt and Asenath could hardly sit still in their excitement. Asenath had never been to a legal session before. Until then, she had never cared about such things, but now she was interested. She stood with other members of Pharaoh's household on one side near the front where she could see what took place. Guards brought the butler in with his arms bound. Scribes presented evidence both on his behalf and against him. Both her father and Potiphar, chief of the king's guard, stood by Pharaoh's throne, listening and occasionally murmuring to each other or to him. When the scribes finished, Pharaoh raised his hand and spoke. I find you not guilty of the crimes of conspiracy. You will be restored to your previous position. Your land and your home will be restored to you. I find you to be a loyal servant. Oh, thank you, my lord, the butler said, falling on his face before the king. Then he stood to his feet and the guards untied his arms. Bowing once more, he then turned and walked from the courtroom. Merritt, Asenath whispered. It's just as Joseph said it would be. The slave girl nodded. But this is the 3rd day. What about the baker? Potiphar, chief of the king's guard, then spoke to Pharaoh. We had 2 other cases scheduled for this afternoon, but apparently the 2 got in a fight during the night. One has died and the other is severely injured. Pharaoh nodded. Do you wish to stop for today? Potiphar continued. Or do you wish to hear one of tomorrow's cases? The next one will be that of your baker. Bring him in. We will take the midday rest, then I will hear his case. Asenath turned and met Merritt's eyes. It was going to happen today, the 3rd day, just as Joseph said. The girl closed her eyes. She was afraid to whisper out loud. But Joseph had said that the one God could hear prayers even inside a person's heart. God of Joseph, I thank you for making a way for this innocent man to be spared. You are good even to my people, she thought, hoping Joseph's God listened to her words.
This broadcast has come from the book Survivors of the Dark Rebellion by Sally Pierson Dillon, with permission from the Review and Herald Publishing Association. This book and the rest of the series, War of the Ages, can be purchased by going to www.adventistbookcenter.com or by calling 1-800-765-6955. I'm your narrator, Austin Backus, and this audio project is a gift to you from my free Christian book ministry, RXF 1888. Please visit our website, www.rxf1888.com, to request free Christian books for both kids and adults. And join us here again for more stories from Mark the Recording Angel.